Hey there, sleepy scientists. Before we drift into tonight's magical ocean adventure, drop a comment and tell me, where in this beautiful world are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? I love knowing that we're all connected under the same moon and stars, no matter where we find ourselves tonight. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, and your mind starts to wander to the most incredible mysteries of our universe? Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most enchanting secrets that happens right here on Earth, every single day and night, without most of us even noticing. We're talking about something so powerful, so mysterious, that it literally moves entire oceans around our planet like a gentle giant playing with water in a cosmic bathtub. Imagine for a moment that you're standing on a quiet beach at midnight. The waves are gently lapping at your feet, and above you, that beautiful silver moon is casting its ethereal glow across the water. But here's what will absolutely blow your mind. That moon up there isn't just giving you light to see by, it's actually reaching down with invisible hands, pulling and pushing those very waves that are touching your toes right now. The moon, sitting there so peacefully 0 miles away from us, has such incredible power that it can move billions and billions of gallons of water across our planet's surface twice every single day. And tonight, as you settle into your cozy spot, we're going to discover exactly how this cosmic dance works, and why it's one of the most beautiful partnerships in our entire universe. But first, let me ask you something that might surprise you. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you go to the beach, the water comes up really high on the sand, and other times you can walk way out and the water seems so far away? Comment below if you've ever wondered why this happens, because what you've witnessed is actually one of the most spectacular shows that nature puts on for us every single day. This magical phenomenon has a name that sounds almost as mysterious as it really is. We call it the tides. And the story of how tides work is like the most incredible bedtime story that science has ever written for us. It's a tale of invisible forces, cosmic partnerships, and the gentle but mighty power of gravity, reaching across the vastness of space to rock our oceans like a cosmic lullaby. Let's start our journey by thinking about gravity in a completely new way. You know gravity as the force that keeps your feet on the ground and makes things fall when you drop them. But gravity is so much more magical than that. It's like an invisible rope that connects everything in the universe to everything else. The bigger something is, the stronger its gravitational rope. And our moon? Well, it might look small up there in the sky, but it's actually enormous. About 1/4 the size of our entire Earth. Now here's where things get really fascinating. That gravitational rope between Earth and the moon doesn't just keep the moon orbiting around us. It's constantly tugging on everything on our planet, including you, me, the trees, the buildings, and yes, all the water in our oceans. But here's the thing that makes water special. Unlike the solid ground beneath our feet, water can actually move and flow in response to that gentle cosmic pull. Picture our Earth as a beautiful blue marble covered in oceans, and imagine the moon as a gentle giant slowly walking around that marble. As the moon moves in its orbit around our planet, its gravitational pull creates what we might call a cosmic bulge in our oceans. The water literally rises up toward the moon, like it's reaching up to say hello to its celestial friend. But wait, here's where the story gets even more magical. While the moon is pulling water toward it on one side of Earth, something equally amazing is happening on the opposite side of our planet. The Earth itself is being pulled slightly toward the moon, but the water on the far side gets left behind a little bit, creating another bulge of water on the opposite side. So at any given moment, our planet has two bulges of water, one facing the moon and one facing away from it. Now, here's the part that might make you want to grab a globe and spin it around to see this in action. Our Earth is constantly spinning, making one complete rotation every 24 hours. This means that as our planet spins, different parts of the coastline move through these two water bulges. When your local beach spins into one of these bulges, the water level rises, and we call this high tide. When your beach spins into the space between the bulges, the water level drops, and this is low tide. Can you imagine how incredible this is? Every single day, every coastline on our planet experiences this cosmic dance twice. 2 high tides and 2 low tides, all because of our moon's gentle but persistent gravitational embrace. It's like the Earth and moon are waltzing together in space, and the oceans are flowing and swaying to their eternal rhythm. But our story doesn't end with just the moon, because there's another cosmic dancer in this celestial ballet, our sun. The sun is much, much larger than the moon, so you might think it would have a stronger effect on our tides. And you'd be right that it does pull on our oceans too. But here's the fascinating twist. The sun is also much, much farther away from us than the moon is. And when it comes to gravitational pull, distance matters a lot. It's like trying to pull a toy toward you with a magnet, The closer the magnet, the stronger the pull. So while the sun does affect our tides, the moon is actually the star of this show. The sun acts more like a supporting actor, sometimes helping the moon create even higher high tides and lower low tides, and sometimes working against the moon to make the tides more gentle and moderate. When the sun and moon line up on the same side of Earth, or when they're on opposite sides, their gravitational pulls work together. These are called spring tides, and they create the most dramatic high and low tides. Don't worry about the name. Spring tides have nothing to do with the season of spring. They're called spring tides because the water seems to spring up extra high and fall extra low. But when the sun and moon are at right angles to each other as seen from Earth, they're basically pulling in different directions, and their effects partially cancel each other out. These are called neap tides, and they're much gentler. The high tides aren't as high, and the low tides aren't as low. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been to a beach during spring tides versus neap tides? Did you notice the difference in how high or low the water was? Now, let's dive deeper into just how amazing this cosmic choreography really is. The timing of tides isn't random at all. It follows a beautiful, predictable pattern that humans have been studying and mapping for thousands of years. Scientists today can tell you exactly when high tide and low tide will occur at any beach in the world, months or even years in advance. It's like having a cosmic calendar that's been keeping perfect time since the Earth and Moon first began their dance billions of years ago. But here's something that might surprise you. Tides don't just happen in the ocean. They happen in large lakes too, though they're much smaller and harder to notice. They even happen in the solid rock of our planet. The Earth's crust actually rises and falls by about a foot twice a day due to the moon's gravitational pull. But it happens so slowly and over such a large area that we can't feel it. Even the atmosphere has tides. The air pressure around us rises and falls slightly as the moon passes overhead. And your body? Well, you're mostly made of water, so technically you have tides too. But don't worry, the effect is so tiny that you'll never notice it. You're much too small for the moon's gravity to move the water in your body in any measurable way. Let's take a moment to appreciate just how perfectly balanced this whole system is. If the moon were much closer to Earth, the tides would be so powerful they could flood coastal cities twice a day. If the moon were much farther away, we might barely have any tides at all. If Earth spun much faster, the tides wouldn't have time to build up properly. If Earth spun much slower, the tides might become so extreme they could reshape our coastlines entirely. It's like the universe designed this cosmic dance to be just right for life on our planet. The tides bring nutrients from the deep ocean up to coastal areas, creating rich feeding grounds for countless sea creatures. They help mix oxygen into the water and carry away waste. Many animals and plants have evolved to depend on the rhythm of the tides for feeding, breeding, and growing. Have you ever wondered why some beaches have tide pools? Those magical little worlds of sea creatures that get left behind when the tide goes out? Comment and let me know if you've ever explored tide pools. These miniature underwater kingdoms exist entirely because of the tides, creating temporary homes for sea anemones, crabs, starfish, and countless other amazing creatures. The rhythm of the tides has been so important to life on Earth that many animals have internal clocks that match the tidal cycle. Some crabs know exactly when to come out of their burrows to feed, even when they can't see the ocean. Certain fish swim up to shallow waters to spawn precisely when the highest tides will help their eggs reach the safest nursery areas. Even some plants along the coast have learned to time their reproduction with the tides. But perhaps the most magical thing about tides is how they connect us to the cosmos in such a direct, tangible way. Every time you watch waves roll onto a beach, you're witnessing the moon's invisible touch, reaching across 250,000 miles of space to gently move the water at your feet. You're seeing proof that we're all part of something much bigger than ourselves, a cosmic dance that's been going on for billions of years and will continue long after we're gone. The next time you're near the ocean, take a moment to really think about what you're seeing. That water moving in and out isn't just random wave action. It's the pulse of our planet, responding to the eternal embrace of the moon. It's gravity made visible, space and time turned into a rhythm you can watch and feel. And here's something beautiful to think about as you drift off to sleep tonight. Right now, as you're listening to this story, tides are happening all over our planet. Waves are rolling onto beaches in Australia, sea levels are rising along the coasts of Africa, and tide pools are filling up with fresh ocean water in tide pools along the Pacific coast. All of this is happening in perfect synchronization with the moon above us, following a pattern that's older than any mountain range, any forest, any form of life on Earth. Scientists estimate that our moon has been creating tides on Earth for about 4.5 billion years. That's older than the oldest rocks, older than the oldest fossils, older than the oxygen in our atmosphere. The tides were here before life began, and they helped create the conditions that made life possible. Some scientists even think that the regular rhythm of tides might have helped the very first life forms develop. by creating natural cycles of wet and dry conditions along ancient shorelines. What do you think about that? Could the gentle, eternal rhythm of the tides have been like a cosmic heartbeat that helped bring life to our planet? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing what you think about these cosmic connections. As we continue our gentle journey through the cosmic dance between the moon and our oceans, let's explore some of the most enchanting secrets that tides have revealed to us over the centuries. Did you know that ancient civilizations were already figuring out the connection between the moon and the tides thousands of years ago? Long before we had modern science to explain gravity, people noticed that the highest and lowest tides seemed to follow the moon's phases with almost magical precision. The ancient Greeks had a philosopher named Pythias, who, around 300 years before Christ was born, sailed to the northern edges of the known world and became one of the first people to write about how the moon controlled the tides. Can you imagine being on a small wooden boat in the rough northern seas with no modern instruments and still being able to figure out this cosmic connection? What dedication to understanding our world. Comment below if you think you would have been brave enough to sail into unknown waters just to study the tides. But here's where our story gets even more fascinating. The way tides work isn't exactly the same everywhere on Earth. Some places have what we call semidiurnal tides. That's the fancy scientific word for having 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day, with each pair being roughly the same height. This is what happens in most places, including the Atlantic coasts of North America and Europe. But other places have diurnal tides, just 1 high tide and 1 low tide each day. This happens in some parts of the Gulf of Mexico and Southeast Asia. And then there are places with mixed tides, where you might have 2 high tides and 2 low tides, but they're all different heights from each other. The Pacific coast of North America often has these mixed tides, where you might have a really high tide in the morning, a medium low tide around noon, a medium high tide in the evening, and a really low tide late at night. Why does this happen? Well, it's because our Earth isn't a perfect smooth sphere covered in perfectly deep water. We have continents that get in the way, underwater mountain ranges that redirect the flowing water, and bays and channels that can amplify or dampen the tidal effects. It's like having a cosmic symphony, but the music sounds different depending on where you're sitting in the concert hall. Some places on Earth have truly spectacular tides that seem almost impossible to believe. In the Bay of Fundy, between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick in Canada, the tides can rise and fall by more than 50 feet twice a day. That's taller than a 4-story building. Imagine watching the ocean floor become completely exposed, then watching as billions of gallons of water come rushing back in to cover it again. The local people there can literally walk on the ocean floor during low tide, picking up shells and seaweed, and then 6 hours later, that same spot is covered by 50 feet of water. Have you ever seen videos of the Bay of Fundy tides? If not, you should definitely look them up after this. They're absolutely mind-blowing. Let me know in the comments what you think about the idea of walking on the ocean floor. The reason the Bay of Fundy has such extreme tides has to do with its shape. The bay is long and narrow and gets shallower toward the back, kind of like a funnel. When the tidal bulge of water tries to squeeze into this funnel shape, it has nowhere to go but up, creating these incredible 50-foot tides. It's like when you're in a bathtub and you push water toward one end, it has to pile up higher and higher. But extreme tides aren't always about height. Sometimes they're about speed. In some narrow channels and passages, the water moves so fast during tidal changes that it creates actual rapids and whirlpools in the ocean. Off the coast of Scotland, there's a whirlpool called the Corrie Vrecken that forms when massive amounts of tidal water try to squeeze through a narrow passage between islands. The water spins and churns with such force that it can be heard from miles away, and it creates waves that can reach 30 feet high. Now let's talk about something that might completely change how you think about time itself. We measure our days by the sun, 24 hours from one noon to the next noon. But the moon keeps its own schedule. A lunar day, the time it takes for the moon to return to the same position in the sky, is actually about 24 hours and 50 minutes. This means that if high tide happens at your local beach at 6 a.m. today, tomorrow it will happen at about 6:50 a.m., and the day after that at about 7:40 a.m. This creates what we might call lunar time, a rhythm that's slightly out of sync with our solar clocks, but perfectly in sync with the cosmic dance between Earth and Moon. Many coastal communities have learned to live by both solar time and lunar time, knowing that their fishing schedules, their beach walks, their tide pooling adventures all need to follow the moon's schedule, not the sun's. Think about how amazing this is. We have 2 different kinds of time happening simultaneously on our planet. Solar time, which governs our daily routines, our work schedules, our meal times, and lunar time, which governs the oceans, the tides, and the rhythm of countless sea creatures. It's like our planet is dancing to two different songs at the same time, and somehow making it work beautifully. Here's something that will make you appreciate the incredible precision of this cosmic clockwork. Scientists can predict the exact time of high and low tide at any location on Earth, not just for tomorrow or next week, but for decades into the future. They publish these predictions in books called tide tables, and mariners, fishermen, and coastal communities depend on them to plan their activities. But how can scientists be so precise about something as complex as the movement of entire oceans? It's because the forces involved, the gravitational pull of the moon and sun, the rotation of the Earth, even the positions of the planets, all follow mathematical laws that never change. It's like having a cosmic clockwork mechanism that's been running perfectly for billions of years. What do you think about the idea that something as seemingly chaotic as ocean waves actually follows such precise mathematical patterns? Drop a comment and let me know if you find this comforting or surprising. The precision of tidal predictions becomes even more amazing when you realize that scientists have to account for dozens of different factors. The moon's orbit around Earth isn't a perfect circle. It's slightly oval-shaped, which means sometimes the moon is closer to us and sometimes it's farther away. When the moon is at its closest point, called perigee, its gravitational pull is stronger and creates slightly higher tides. When it's at its farthest point, called apogee, the tides are slightly smaller. The Earth's orbit around the sun also affects our tides. When our planet is closest to the sun in early January, the sun's gravitational effect on our tides is slightly stronger. When we're farthest from the sun in early July, the sun's tidal effect is slightly weaker. Even the angle of the moon's orbit compared to Earth's equator changes over time, creating complex patterns that repeat every 18.6 years. But our story gets even more magical when we realize that tides don't just happen in water. They happen throughout the entire universe. Every planet, every moon, every star pulls on every other celestial body with the same gravitational forces that create our ocean tides. Jupiter's moons experience tides so powerful that they actually heat up the rocky interiors of the moons through constant stretching and squeezing. One of Jupiter's moons, Io, has volcanoes that are powered entirely by tidal forces. And here's something that might blow your mind. The moon is very slowly moving away from Earth because of tides. Every time our oceans rise and fall, they create a tiny bit of friction that gradually slows down Earth's rotation. And when Earth's rotation slows down, the moon has to move to a higher orbit to conserve the total angular momentum of the Earth-Moon system. The moon is currently moving away from us at about the same rate that your fingernails grow, about 1.5 inches per year. This means that billions of years ago, when life was first beginning on Earth, the moon was much closer to us, and the tides were much more dramatic. Some scientists think these ancient supertides might have been one of the key factors that helped life move from the oceans onto land by creating vast tidal zones, where early organisms could gradually adapt to living both underwater and in air. What's your favorite part of this cosmic story so far? Are you more amazed by the precision of tidal predictions, or by the idea that tides are gradually changing the Earth-Moon system over billions of years? Let me know in the comments. As we think about these vast timescales, it's beautiful to realize that the gentle rhythm of the tides connects us not just to the moon above us, but to the entire history of our planet and the entire future of our solar system. Every wave that rolls onto a beach is part of a story that began billions of years ago and will continue for billions of years into the future. But tides don't just connect us to deep time. They also connect us to the entire web of life on our planet right now. In the Amazon River, more than 0 miles from the ocean, the tides are still strong enough to affect the water level and the direction of flow. Fish that live in the Amazon have learned to time their migrations with these tidal rhythms, even though they might never see the ocean. Coral reefs around the world depend on tidal currents to bring them food and oxygen, and to carry away their waste products. The Great Barrier Reef, the largest living structure on Earth, exists in its current form partly because of the way tidal currents have shaped the flow of water and nutrients along Australia's coast for millions of years. Even in the deepest parts of the ocean, far from any coast, the tides create currents that help mix the water and distribute heat around our planet. These deep tidal currents are part of the global circulation system that helps regulate Earth's climate and weather patterns. So in a very real sense, the moon's gravitational pull doesn't just move our surface waters, it helps control the weather and climate of our entire planet. Have you ever thought about how the moon might be affecting the weather where you live right now? It's a fascinating connection that most people never consider. Now let's explore one of the most enchanting aspects of tidal science, how different creatures have learned to live by the moon's rhythm. There are animals all over our planet that have developed internal clocks perfectly synchronized with the tides, even when they can't see the ocean or feel the water moving. Take the grunion fish of Southern California. These remarkable little silverfish have figured out something that seems almost impossible. They know exactly when the highest tides of the month will occur, and they use this knowledge to plan their entire reproductive cycle. On certain nights during spring and summer, when the moon is full or new and the tides are at their very highest, thousands of grunion will ride the waves onto sandy beaches to lay their eggs. But here's the magical part. They don't just randomly show up hoping for high tide. They arrive precisely at the moment when the tide is at its absolute peak and just beginning to recede. The female fish dig their tails into the wet sand and lay their eggs, while the males wrap around them to fertilize the eggs. Then they all ride the next wave back out to sea, leaving their eggs safely buried in the sand above the normal high tide line. For the next 2 weeks, as the tides get smaller and smaller, those eggs develop in the warm, moist sand, completely safe from ocean predators and waves. Then, when the next set of spring tides arrives 2 weeks later, the high waves wash over the eggs for the first time since they were laid, and this triggers them all to hatch at once. Thousands of tiny baby grunions swim out to sea with their very first wave experience. Can you imagine having such perfect timing that you could predict the moon's schedule 2 weeks in advance and plan your entire family's future around it? Comment below if you think this kind of natural timing is amazing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how these fish developed such incredible lunar awareness. But grunion aren't the only creatures that have mastered lunar time. Fiddler crabs that live in tidal marshes change their behavior throughout the day, following a rhythm that matches the tides perfectly. Even when they're taken to a laboratory far from the ocean, their internal clocks keep ticking in tune with the rise and fall of distant waters they can no longer see or feel. Oysters have been found to open and close their shells in rhythm with the tides, even when they're moved to places hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. Scientists discovered this by accident when they were studying oysters in a laboratory in the middle of Illinois. The oysters kept opening and closing at regular intervals. And when the researchers checked the timing, they found the oysters were still following the tidal schedule of the Connecticut coast, where they had originally been collected. Even more amazing, when the oysters had been in Illinois for a few weeks, their timing gradually shifted to match what the tides would be if there were an ocean in Illinois. It was as if their internal clocks were slowly adjusting to their new longitude, trying to stay in sync with the moon's position overhead, even though there was no water around them to actually move. This suggests that many sea creatures don't just respond to the physical movement of water. They have internal biological clocks that are somehow directly tuned to the moon's gravitational field itself. It's like they can feel the cosmic dance between Earth and Moon happening inside their own bodies. Marine worms called palolo worms take this lunar timing to an almost unbelievable extreme. These worms live in coral reefs in the Pacific Ocean, and for most of the year they look like ordinary worms burrowing in and out of the coral. But on one specific night each year, always the night of the third quarter moon in October or November, something magical happens. All the palolo worms in the entire Pacific Ocean simultaneously release the back halves of their bodies, which are filled with eggs and sperm. These reproductive segments float to the surface in massive, writhing swarms that can cover hundreds of square miles of ocean. The timing is so precise that people in Samoa and other Pacific islands plan festivals around palolo swarming night, because they know exactly when it will happen months in advance. After one night of reproduction, the swarming segments die and sink back to the ocean floor, while the front halves of the worms that stayed in the coral begin growing new back halves for next year's spawning. It's like the entire species has agreed to hold the world's largest synchronized swimming and dating event, all timed to a celestial calendar that never changes. What do you think drives this kind of perfect timing across an entire ocean? How do you think millions of individual worms manage to coordinate their behavior so precisely? Share your theories in the comments. But the influence of tides reaches far beyond the ocean. Many plants that grow along coastlines have learned to time their growth cycles with the tides. Some saltmarsh grasses grow faster during spring tide periods when more nutrients are brought in by the higher waters. Mangrove trees drop their seeds precisely when tidal currents are strongest, ensuring their offspring will be carried to new growing areas. Even some land animals that live near coasts have developed tidal rhythms. Certain species of coastal birds time their feeding to low tide when mudflats are exposed and full of accessible worms and crabs. They know exactly when to show up at their favorite feeding spots, even on cloudy days when they can't see the state of the tide. Humans throughout history have also learned to live by tidal time. Before modern transportation made it easy to bring food from far away, coastal communities depended heavily on understanding tidal patterns for their survival. They knew exactly when the lowest tides would expose the best clamming grounds, when the highest tides would bring fish close to shore, and when tidal currents would be strongest for powering watermills. In some parts of the world, people still plan their daily activities around the tides. In the Mont Saint-Michel region of France, there's a famous abbey built on an island that becomes completely surrounded by water during high tide and accessible on foot during low tide. For over 1,000 years, pilgrims and visitors have had to time their journeys to match the lunar schedule, creating a rhythm of human activity that flows with the cosmic dance of Earth and Moon. Have you ever had to plan an activity around the tides? Maybe a beach walk, fishing trip, or tide pooling adventure? Let me know in the comments how it felt to align your schedule with the moon's rhythm. The more we learn about tides, the more we realize they're not just a local phenomenon affecting coastlines. They're part of a global system that connects every part of our planet's water cycle. The same gravitational forces that create tides in the ocean also affect groundwater, creating tiny but measurable changes in the water level of wells and underground aquifers. Large lakes like the Great Lakes experience their own tides, though they're much smaller than ocean tides, usually only an inch or two. But even these tiny changes can affect the ecosystems around the lakes, influencing where fish spawn and how nutrients are distributed along the shores. Rivers that connect to the ocean can carry tidal influences hundreds of miles inland. The Hudson River in New York carries tidal effects all the way to Albany, about 150 miles from the ocean. During strong incoming tides, the river actually flows backward, carrying salt water and ocean nutrients far upstream. Fish that live in these tidal rivers have learned to use these twice-daily flow reversals for transportation, riding the currents upstream during flood tide and downstream during ebb tide. But perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of tidal science is how it reveals the deep connections between our planet and the cosmos. When we study tides carefully, we're essentially studying gravity itself, the fundamental force that holds the entire universe together. The same force that keeps our feet on the ground, that holds planets in orbit around stars, that shapes galaxies and clusters of galaxies, is the force we can watch and measure every time we observe the tides. Einstein's theory of relativity tells us that gravity isn't really a force pulling objects together. It's actually the curvature of space and time itself. Massive objects like Earth and the Moon create dips and curves in the fabric of space-time, and objects move along these curves like marbles rolling around a curved surface. From this perspective, the tides aren't really the result of the moon pulling on our oceans. Instead, the moon creates a curvature in space-time, and our oceans are simply following the natural contours of that curved space. It's like the entire universe is made of a flexible fabric, and the moon creates a gentle slope in that fabric that our water naturally flows along. When you watch waves rolling onto a beach, you're seeing the shape of space-time itself made visible in moving water. You're watching the geometry of the universe expressed in the rhythm of the tides. Is that not the most beautiful way you've ever thought about going to the beach? This cosmic perspective makes the precision of tidal predictions even more amazing. Scientists aren't just tracking the movement of water. They're mapping the curvature of space-time around our planet, and using that map to predict how matter will move through that curved space. They're reading the script of the cosmic dance written in the language of mathematics and physics. The equations that describe tidal forces are the same equations that describe how binary stars orbit each other, how planets form around young stars, and how black holes warp space-time so dramatically that they can bend light itself. When we study tides, we're studying the fundamental principles that govern the behavior of the entire universe. What amazes you more? The idea that you can see the curvature of space-time in ocean waves? Or the fact that the same math that predicts tides also explains black holes? Drop a comment, and let me know which cosmic connection blows your mind the most. As our understanding of tides has grown more sophisticated, we've also learned to use tidal forces as a source of clean energy. Tidal power plants work by capturing the energy of moving water as tides flow in and out of coastal areas. Unlike solar panels that only work when the sun is shining, or wind turbines that only work when the wind is blowing, tidal power is completely predictable. We know exactly when the strongest tidal currents will occur for decades into the future. Some tidal power systems work like underwater windmills, with turbines that spin as tidal currents flow past them. Others work more like traditional dams, filling reservoirs during high tide, and then releasing the water through generators during low tide. The largest tidal power plant in the world is in South Korea, and it can generate enough electricity to power a city of 500. 0 people using nothing but the predictable rhythm of the tides. But the future of tidal energy might be even more exciting. Engineers are working on floating tidal generators that could be anchored in deep water offshore, where tidal currents are strongest and most consistent. They're designing underwater kites that can fly through tidal currents like birds soaring through wind currents, generating electricity as they move up and down and side to side with the flowing water. Imagine a future where much of our electricity comes from the same cosmic forces that have been creating tides for billions of years. We could power our cities and our lives using the eternal dance between Earth and Moon, tapping into an energy source that will never run out as long as the Moon continues to orbit our planet. This brings us to one of the most beautiful aspects of tidal science, its connection to the very long-term future of our planet and solar system. As we mentioned earlier, the Moon is gradually moving away from Earth due to tidal friction. This process is incredibly slow, but over billions of years, it will fundamentally change the relationship between Earth and Moon. Billions of years from now, when the Moon has moved much farther away from Earth, our tides will be much smaller and gentler. But long before that happens, something even more remarkable will occur. The Earth and Moon will become tidally locked to each other, just like the Moon is already tidally locked to Earth right now. You've probably noticed that we always see the same face of the Moon. That's because the Moon's rotation period exactly matches its orbital period around Earth. It takes the same amount of time for the Moon to spin once on its axis as it takes to complete one orbit around our planet. This happened because Earth's gravity gradually slowed down the Moon's rotation over millions of years until it became synchronized with its orbit. Eventually, the same thing will happen to Earth. The Moon's gravity will gradually slow down our planet's rotation until one day on Earth lasts as long as 1 month. When that happens, one side of Earth will always face the Moon and experience constant high tide, while the other side will always face away from the Moon. Half of our planet will have permanent moonlight, while the other half will never see the Moon at all. But don't worry about this happening anytime soon. Scientists estimate it will take about 50 billion years for Earth and Moon to become tidally locked. That's more than 10 times longer than our Sun is expected to exist. So this cosmic synchronization will happen long after our Sun has burned out, and our solar system has been transformed beyond recognition. Still, it's amazing to think that the gentle tides we see today are part of a slow-motion cosmic dance that will eventually lead to such a dramatically different Earth. Every wave that rolls onto every beach is a tiny step in this billion-year transformation of our planet and its relationship with the Moon. What do you think Earth would be like with permanent tides on one side and no tides on the other? How do you think life might adapt to such different conditions? Share your wildest ideas in the comments. But let's bring our story back to the here and now, because there are still so many magical aspects of tides happening all around us today. One of the most beautiful things about tidal science is how it reveals the hidden connections between seemingly separate parts of our world. For example, did you know that the Amazon rainforest is partially fed by nutrients that come from the Sahara Desert, carried across the Atlantic Ocean by currents that are influenced by tidal mixing? Or that the seasonal monsoons that bring life-giving rain to billions of people in Asia are affected by how tidal forces mix different layers of ocean water in the Indian Ocean? Tides help create and maintain the great ocean currents that carry warm water toward the poles and cold water toward the equator, helping to regulate Earth's climate and making our planet more habitable. The Gulf Stream, which carries warm water from the Caribbean up the east coast of North America and across to Europe, is strengthened and guided by tidal mixing along its entire route. Without tides, the oceans would be much more stratified, with warm water sitting on top of cold water, and very little mixing between different layers. This would make the oceans less able to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, less able to distribute oxygen to deep water where many creatures live, and less able to transport nutrients from the depths to the surface where marine plants need them to grow. In a very real sense, tides help keep our entire planet's climate system in balance. They're not just a pretty phenomenon we can watch at the beach. They're a fundamental part of what makes Earth habitable for complex life. Here's something that might surprise you. Tides even affect the weather on land. When large masses of water move during tidal changes, they can influence local air pressure and wind patterns. Some coastal areas experience regular daily breezes that are partly caused by the thermal effects of tidal water movement. In certain parts of the world, weather forecasters actually take tidal patterns into account when predicting local wind and temperature changes. The relationship between tides and weather becomes even more interesting during storms. Hurricane storm surge, the wall of water that hurricanes push onto shore, is made much worse when it coincides with high tide. Emergency managers have to carefully track both the storm's timing and the tidal schedule to predict how severe coastal flooding will be. Have you ever experienced a storm during high tide versus low tide? If so, drop a comment about how different the water levels were. It's incredible how much difference the timing can make. But perhaps the most personally meaningful aspect of tidal science is how it can change the way we think about our place in the universe. When you really understand tides, you realize that you're not separate from the cosmos, you're part of it. Every cell in your body contains water that responds, however slightly, to the same gravitational forces that move the oceans. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the water in your tissues, all of these materials came from ancient stars that lived and died billions of years ago, and they're all subject to the same universal forces that create tides. You are literally made of stardust, organized in a way that can think and feel and wonder about the cosmic dance that surrounds and includes you. When you stand on a beach and watch the waves roll in, you're not just observing nature, you're participating in it. The water that touches your feet has traveled around the world countless times, driven by forces that connect you to the moon, the sun, and the deep structure of space and time itself. This is why studying tides can be such a meditative, almost spiritual experience. It's a way of directly connecting with forces and patterns that are much larger and older and more fundamental than our daily human concerns. It's a reminder that we're part of something beautiful and vast and precisely ordered. Many people find great comfort in the predictability of tides. In a world where so many things seem chaotic and uncertain, there's something deeply reassuring about knowing that twice a day, every day, for billions of years past and billions of years to come, the tides will rise and fall with mathematical precision. It's like having a cosmic heartbeat that never skips, a universal rhythm that connects all times and all places. Some coastal communities have traditions of gathering to watch particularly high tides, or especially low tides, treating these events as natural celebrations. There's something magical about joining with other people to witness the moon's invisible hand at work, moving vast amounts of water with such gentle but irresistible power. Indigenous peoples around the world have incorporated tidal patterns into their spiritual and cultural practices for thousands of years. Many creation stories include the rhythm of tides as a fundamental part of how the world was made, and how it continues to be renewed each day. The idea that the land and sea are connected through cosmic forces that are both powerful and gentle appears in cultures from every continent. What role do you think tides should play in how we think about our relationship with nature? Do you find the predictability of tides comforting or amazing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As we near the end of our sleepy journey through the science of tides, let's take a moment to appreciate just how much we've discovered together. We've learned that tides are created by the gravitational dance between Earth, Moon, and Sun. We've seen how this cosmic choreography creates different types of tides in different places, from the extreme 50-foot tides of the Bay of Fundy to the gentle tides of enclosed seas. We've discovered that countless creatures have learned to live by lunar time, timing their most important life events to match the rhythm of the tides. We've explored how tides connect to weather, climate, ocean currents, and the global circulation of nutrients and energy that keeps our planet habitable. We've seen how tides reveal the curvature of space-time itself, making Einstein's theories visible in the movement of water. We've imagined how tides connect us to the deep past when they helped life move from sea to land, and to the far future when Earth and Moon will dance in perfect synchronization. We've learned that tides don't just happen in oceans, but in lakes, rivers, groundwater, the solid Earth, and even the atmosphere. We've discovered that the same forces creating tides on Earth also power volcanoes on Jupiter's moons and geysers on Saturn's moons, connecting us to a universe full of gravitational artistry. Most importantly, we've seen how understanding tides can give us a sense of being part of something much larger than ourselves, a cosmic dance that's been going on for billions of years and will continue long after we're gone. Every time you see waves rolling onto a beach, you're witnessing this eternal dance made visible. The next time you're near the ocean, take a moment to really watch the water. Notice how it moves with such purposeful rhythm. Remember that what you're seeing isn't random. It's the result of precise gravitational forces reaching across space to gently rock our planet's waters like a cosmic lullaby. Listen to the sound of the waves, and remember that this sound has been playing continuously for billions of years. The same rhythm, the same eternal song, connecting every moment to every other moment in the long history of our planet. You're listening to the heartbeat of the Earth-Moon system, a rhythm that's older than life itself but somehow feels as familiar as your own pulse. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy knowing that while you dream, the tides will continue their eternal dance. The moon will pull gently on our oceans, the water will rise and fall in patterns that can be predicted centuries in advance, and the same forces that rock you to sleep will be rocking coastlines all around our beautiful blue planet. Sweet dreams, sleepy scientists. May your dreams be filled with cosmic dances, gravitational embraces, and the gentle rhythm of tides connecting you to the infinite beauty of our universe. And as we settle deeper into this cosmic lullaby, let's explore some of the most enchanting tidal phenomena that most people never get to witness. There are places on our planet where tides create displays so spectacular, so otherworldly, that they seem like something from a fairy tale. In certain parts of the world, when conditions are just right, tides can create what's called a tidal bore, a wall of water that travels up rivers like a slow-motion tsunami. The most famous tidal bore happens on the Chantang River in China, where during the strongest spring tides, a wave up to 30 feet high rushes upstream for hundreds of miles, moving faster than a person can run. Local people gather by the thousands to watch this incredible spectacle, which happens only a few times each year when the moon, sun, and earth align just right. The wave makes a sound like distant thunder as it approaches, and when it passes, the entire river is transformed, What was flowing toward the sea is suddenly flowing inland, carrying with it foam, debris, and sometimes even fish that get caught up in this liquid avalanche. But even more magical than the big, famous tidal bores are the smaller ones that happen in quiet places where few people ever see them. There are creeks and small rivers around the world where, during the highest tides, a gentle wave of water comes flowing upstream, transforming the landscape for a few hours before quietly retreating back to the sea. Imagine walking along a peaceful stream and suddenly seeing the water start flowing backward, carrying leaves and twigs upstream, while making soft gurgling sounds as it encounters rocks and fallen logs. It's like watching time itself flow in reverse. Nature's own magic trick performed twice a month when the tides are strongest. Have you ever seen water flow upstream? If you have, tell us about it in the comments. These moments are so rare and special that each sighting feels like discovering a secret that nature has been keeping. Another incredible tidal phenomenon happens in places where underwater topography creates standing waves. Places where tidal water gets trapped and rocks back and forth like water sloshing in a bathtub. Lake Superior, despite being a freshwater lake, has areas where this kind of tidal resonance creates waves that can persist for hours, even when there's no wind. But perhaps the most mysterious tidal phenomenon of all is something called an internal tide. These are tides that happen not at the surface of the ocean, but deep underwater, where layers of water with different temperatures and densities meet. These internal tides can be hundreds of feet high, but because they happen entirely underwater, sailors on the surface might never know they're there. Scientists have discovered internal tides using underwater sensors and satellite measurements that can detect the subtle changes these deep waves create at the surface. Some internal tides are so large they affect the temperature of entire regions of ocean, bringing cold, nutrient-rich water up from the depths or pushing warm surface water down into the abyss. These hidden tides play a crucial role in mixing the ocean and distributing heat around our planet, but they remain largely invisible to us surface dwellers. It's like discovering that there's an entire second ocean underneath the one we can see, with its own tides, its own currents, and its own rhythm that follows the same lunar schedule but creates effects we're only beginning to understand. What do you think about the idea that there might be massive tidal waves moving through the deep ocean right now? Waves taller than skyscrapers, that we can't see from the surface. Does it make the ocean feel more mysterious and magical to you? Share your thoughts. The study of these internal tides has revealed something remarkable about how energy moves through our planet's oceans. When surface tides encounter underwater mountains and ridges, some of their energy gets converted into these deep internal waves. These internal tides can then travel for thousands of miles through the deep ocean, carrying energy from one part of the world to another in ways that scientists are still trying to fully understand. It's like discovering that the ocean has its own internal weather system, driven by the same lunar forces that create surface tides but operating in a completely different realm. Some of these internal waves eventually break at the surface, thousands of miles from where they were created, creating patches of choppy water that mariners have noticed for centuries without understanding their origin. This hidden tidal system affects everything from the migration patterns of deep-sea creatures to the global circulation of carbon and nutrients. Whales and other marine animals may use these internal tides as highways for long-distance travel, riding the deep currents like aquatic hitchhikers following invisible lunar schedules. But tides don't just create hidden phenomena in the deep ocean. They also create some of the most spectacular visible displays in shallow coastal waters. In certain bays and estuaries around the world, the interaction between tides and local geography creates what are called tidal races, areas where water flows so fast during tidal changes that it creates rapids, whirlpools, and standing waves, right in the middle of what looks like calm ocean water. The Old So Whirlpool between Maine and New Brunswick is one of the largest tidal whirlpools in the Western Hemisphere. During peak tidal flow, water spirals in a circle more than 250 feet across, creating a natural maelstrom that can suck floating objects down into its spinning center. Local fishermen have learned to time their trips to avoid these dangerous waters during the strongest tidal periods. But not all tidal races are dangerous. Some create playgrounds for adventurous kayakers and surfers who have learned to ride the standing waves that form when fast-moving tidal water encounters underwater obstacles. These tidal surfers can ride the same wave for hours as long as the tide keeps flowing, surfing on water that's moving horizontally rather than rolling toward shore like ocean waves. In Scotland, there are places where tidal races create waves so consistent and predictable that they've become destinations for surfers from around the world. These waves exist only during certain tidal conditions, appearing twice a day like clockwork, and then disappearing completely when the tide changes direction. Can you imagine surfing a wave that's created not by wind or storms, but by the gravitational pull of the moon. It's like riding the cosmic forces directly, using lunar energy for the ultimate natural thrill ride. Have any of you ever tried tidal surfing or seen these kinds of standing tidal waves? I'd love to hear about your experiences. The relationship between tides and weather creates some of the most beautiful and dramatic natural phenomena on our planet. When strong winds combine with extreme tides, they can create conditions that transform familiar coastlines into alien landscapes. During major storms that coincide with spring tides, waves can reach heights and travel distances that seem impossible under normal conditions. But tides also create gentler weather phenomena that are just as magical in their own way. In many coastal areas, the movement of large masses of tidal water creates daily temperature changes that help moderate local climate. Coastal cities often stay cooler in summer and warmer in winter than inland areas at the same latitude, partly because tidal waters act like enormous thermal regulators, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it at night. Some coastal areas experience regular daily fog patterns that are directly related to tidal cycles. When cold tidal water moves over sun-warmed land, or when warm tidal water encounters cool air, the resulting condensation can create fog banks that roll in and out with remarkable predictability. San Francisco's famous fog is partly the result of complex interactions between Pacific tides, coastal geography, and temperature differences between land and sea. These tidal fogs often create some of the most ethereal and beautiful coastal scenes imaginable. Harbors and beaches appearing and disappearing in shifting veils of mist, lighthouse beams cutting through gray curtains of condensation, the sound of foghorns echoing across water that's sometimes visible and sometimes completely hidden. There's something deeply peaceful about experiencing these tidal fogs. They slow everything down, muffle sounds, and create a sense of being in a world apart from normal reality. Walking through tidal fog feels like moving through a cloud, with familiar landmarks appearing and vanishing like ghosts in the shifting gray light. Many coastal communities have learned to appreciate these fog patterns as part of the natural rhythm of their environment. Some plants and animals depend on tidal fogs for moisture, especially in areas where summer rain is rare. The famous redwood forests of California actually get much of their water from fog that condenses on their needles and drips to the ground, and much of this fog is created by the interaction between Pacific tides and coastal temperature patterns. What's your experience with coastal fog? Do you find it mysterious and romantic? Or does it make you feel isolated? Drop a comment about your favorite foggy weather memory. The influence of tides on plant and animal life becomes even more fascinating when we look at how different species have evolved to take advantage of very specific tidal conditions. There are flowers that bloom only during the lowest tides of the year, when particular patches of shoreline are exposed to sunlight for the first time in months. There are fish that spawn only in tide pools that form during certain combinations of tide height and wave action. Some of the most remarkable tidal adaptations happen in mangrove forests, where trees have learned to live with their roots, alternately flooded and exposed twice every day. These incredible plants have developed special root systems that can filter salt out of seawater, and they've learned to time their reproduction to match tidal patterns that will give their seedlings the best chance of finding suitable growing spots. Mangrove seeds, called propagules, are like little green submarines that can float in salt water for months while they search for the perfect place to take root. Some species drop their seeds during the highest tides of the year, ensuring maximum dispersal range. Others wait for specific tidal conditions that will carry their offspring to particular types of coastal habitat. Walking through a mangrove forest during different tidal states is like visiting two completely different ecosystems. During high tide, you're paddling through a flooded forest, where fish swim between tree trunks and rays glide over what will become dry ground in a few hours. During low tide, the same area becomes a maze of exposed roots, mudflats, and tidal channels where crabs scurry and shorebirds probe for hidden treasures. The sounds of a mangrove forest change completely with the tides too. High tide brings the gentle lapping of water against bark and the splash of fish jumping between branches. Low tide reveals the clicking and bubbling of countless crabs, the squelch of footsteps in exposed mud, and the calls of birds that arrive precisely on schedule to take advantage of newly accessible feeding areas. These mangrove ecosystems are some of the most productive habitats on Earth, supporting an incredible diversity of life forms that have all learned to dance to the rhythm of the tides. They're also crucial for protecting coastlines from storm damage and for filtering pollutants out of water before it reaches the open ocean. But mangroves are just one example of how tides create unique ecosystems. Salt marshes, another type of tidal habitat, support their own specialized communities of plants and animals. These grasslands of the sea flood and drain twice daily, creating conditions that only the most adaptable species can survive. Salt marsh grasses have evolved to tolerate not just salt water, but the constant alternation between being underwater and being exposed to air and sun. They've developed special cells that can store salt and then excrete it through their leaves, and root systems that can survive in soil that alternates between waterlogged and well-drained twice every day. These marshes serve as nurseries for countless species of fish, as nesting sites for migratory birds, and as natural water treatment plants that filter nutrients and pollutants from runoff before it reaches the ocean. They're also incredibly effective at storing carbon, helping to mitigate climate change by pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it in their soil. The beauty of salt marshes changes dramatically with the seasons and the tides. During spring and summer high tides, they look like vast green meadows floating on the water, with only the tips of grass blades visible above the surface. During winter low tides, they become golden landscapes of waving grass, interrupted by winding channels that reflect the sky like natural mirrors. Have you ever walked through a salt marsh or tidal wetland? These places have a unique beauty and peace that's hard to find anywhere else. The combination of water, grass, and sky creates some of the most serene landscapes on our planet. Tell us in the comments about your favorite tidal ecosystem, whether it's rocky tide pools, sandy beaches, muddy marshes, or something else entirely. The relationship between tides and human culture runs deeper than most people realize. Throughout history, coastal communities have developed entire ways of life around tidal rhythms. Traditional fishing methods, architectural styles, agricultural practices, and even social customs have all been shaped by the need to work with the twice-daily rise and fall of the sea. In many parts of the world, traditional houses in tidal areas are built on stilts or have foundations designed to handle regular flooding. These aren't emergency measures for occasional storms. They're normal architectural adaptations to daily tidal cycles. People in these communities often have boats tied up right outside their front doors, and they think nothing of paddling to the market during high tide and walking the same route during low tide. Some coastal communities have developed unique agricultural systems that take advantage of tidal flooding to irrigate crops with nutrient-rich seawater. These tidal farms can produce food in areas where freshwater irrigation would be impossible, and they often yield crops that are specially adapted to slight saltiness and periodic flooding. The timing of daily activities in many coastal cultures still follows tidal schedules rather than solar schedules. People might eat their main meal when the tide is right for fishing, regardless of what time the clock says. Markets might open and close based on when boats can reach the harbor, rather than following standard business hours. Even in modern times, many coastal communities maintain traditions that celebrate particularly high or low tides. There are festivals timed to coincide with the lowest tides of the year, when people can walk to islands that are normally unreachable, or explore parts of the seafloor that are only exposed a few times annually. These cultural connections to tidal time represent a different way of thinking about our relationship with nature, one where human schedules adapt to natural rhythms rather than trying to impose artificial schedules on the natural world. There's something both ancient and forward-thinking about this approach, a wisdom that many modern people are starting to rediscover. What would it be like to live your life more in tune with tidal rhythms? Do you think following natural cycles instead of clock time might make people happier or more connected to their environment? Share your thoughts about living by lunar time. The science of predicting tides has become so sophisticated that we can now forecast tidal conditions decades into the future with incredible accuracy. This precision comes from understanding not just the basic gravitational forces involved, but also hundreds of smaller influences that affect how tides behave in specific locations. Modern tide prediction takes into account the exact shape of the ocean floor, the configuration of coastlines, the effect of underwater mountain ranges, the influence of river systems, and even seasonal changes in water temperature and density. Computers process all of this information using mathematical models that can account for dozens of different tidal constituents, the various rhythms and cycles that combine to create the unique tidal pattern at each location. But even with all this computational power, there are still aspects of tidal behavior that surprise scientists. Climate change is beginning to affect tidal patterns in subtle but measurable ways. As sea levels rise and ocean temperatures change, the behavior of tides is slowly shifting. Some areas are experiencing slightly higher high tides, while others are seeing changes in the timing of tidal cycles. These changes are usually very small, measured in inches or minutes rather than feet or hours, but they can have significant effects on coastal ecosystems and human communities that have adapted to very specific tidal conditions over many generations. Scientists are working to understand how these gradual changes might affect everything from the spawning cycles of fish to the stability of coastal marshes. The study of how tides might change in the future has become an important part of climate science. As we work to understand and prepare for rising sea levels, we need to know not just how much higher the average water level might become, but also how the daily rhythm of tides might be affected. Some computer models suggest that in certain areas, the difference between high and low tide might become more extreme as sea levels rise, while in other areas, the tidal range might become smaller. These changes could have profound effects on coastal ecosystems, that depend on very specific patterns of flooding and exposure. But regardless of how tides might change in the future, the fundamental forces that create them will remain constant for billions of years to come. The gravitational dance between Earth, Moon, and Sun will continue, and our oceans will keep responding to that cosmic choreography with their eternal rhythm of rise and fall. This long-term stability of tidal forces provides a kind of comfort in an uncertain world. While many aspects of our environment are changing rapidly, the basic pattern of tides represents something enduring and reliable, a connection to forces that are larger and more permanent than human activities. There's something deeply reassuring about knowing that no matter what changes the future might bring, the moon will still pull on our oceans, the tides will still rise and fall twice a day, and the beaches of the world will still echo with the sound of waves that have been rolling ashore for billions of years. As we think about the future of tides, it's worth considering how our growing understanding of these forces might change the way we live and work. Tidal energy is becoming an increasingly important source of renewable power, and new technologies are being developed to harness tidal forces in ways that work with natural rhythms rather than against them. Floating cities and offshore communities are being designed to rise and fall with the tides, creating human habitats that move in harmony with natural cycles. Architecture that responds to tidal changes, buildings that can handle periodic flooding, bridges that adjust their height based on water levels, ports that work efficiently at any tidal state, represents a new kind of design thinking that embraces change rather than trying to resist it. Even urban planning is beginning to incorporate tidal considerations in new ways. Cities are creating parks and public spaces that transform with the tides, becoming waterfront plazas during low tide and shallow lagoons during high tide. These spaces celebrate the dynamic nature of tidal environments, rather than trying to impose static human structures on changing natural conditions. What kind of tidal responsive architecture or urban design would you like to see? Imagine buildings that breathe with the tides, or parks that become underwater gardens twice a day. Share your most creative ideas in the comments. The psychological and spiritual effects of living with tidal rhythms are becoming better understood as more people seek ways to reconnect with natural cycles. Many people report that spending time in tidal environments helps them develop a different sense of time, one that's more flexible, more attuned to natural changes, and less driven by the relentless ticking of clocks. There's something about the predictable yet ever-changing nature of tides that can be deeply meditative. The knowledge that this rhythm has been continuing for billions of years and will continue for billions more can provide perspective on the temporary nature of daily worries and concerns. Some people find that watching tides helps them develop patience and acceptance of natural rhythms. Instead of always trying to impose their own timeline on activities, they learn to work with the schedule that nature provides. This can lead to a more relaxed and sustainable way of living that reduces stress and increases satisfaction. The sound of tidal waters, whether it's waves on a beach, water gurgling through tidal channels, or the gentle lapping of tide pools, has been shown to have calming effects on the human nervous system. Many people use recordings of tidal sounds to help them sleep, meditate, or concentrate, tapping into the ancient human connection to these rhythms. But perhaps the most profound effect of understanding tides is the way it can change our perception of our place in the universe. When you really grasp that the water moving at your feet is responding to gravitational forces from 250,000 miles away, it's impossible to maintain the illusion that you're separate from the cosmos. Every breath you take contains water molecules that have been lifted and lowered by countless tides. Every step you take on a beach connects you to forces that shaped the formation of our solar system. Every wave you watch is a visible manifestation of the fundamental forces that hold galaxies together and guide the dance of planets around stars. This cosmic perspective doesn't diminish the importance of human life. If anything, it makes our existence seem even more remarkable and precious. We are arrangements of stardust that have become conscious enough to understand and appreciate the forces that created us. We are the universe becoming aware of itself, able to feel wonder at the cosmic dance of which we are a part. As we reach the gentle conclusion of our tidal journey together, take a moment to appreciate the incredible story we've shared. We've traveled from the surface of a quiet beach to the far reaches of space and time, discovering connections that link every drop of ocean water to the fundamental structure of reality itself. We've seen how the moon's gravity reaches across the void to move entire oceans with gentle precision, creating rhythms that have persisted for billions of years. We've learned how countless creatures have evolved to dance to this cosmic beat, timing their most important life events to match the eternal schedule written in the movement of celestial bodies. We've explored how tides create some of the most spectacular phenomena on our planet, from 50-foot walls of water in the Bay of Fundy to hidden internal waves hundreds of feet high that move invisibly through the deep ocean. We've discovered how these same forces that move water also move the solid Earth itself, creating tides in rock and air that connect every part of our planet to the gravitational embrace of moon and sun. We've traveled forward in time to imagine a future where tidal energy powers our cities and tidal rhythms guide our architecture, and backward in time to appreciate how these ancient forces helped create the conditions that made life possible on our beautiful blue world. Most importantly, we've discovered that understanding tides offers us a way to feel connected to something much larger than ourselves, a cosmic dance that includes every atom in our bodies, every breath we take, and every heartbeat that sustains us. The next time you're near any body of water, whether it's a vast ocean, a peaceful lake, or even a small pond, remember that you're looking at water that participates in this ancient dance. Even the water in your own body responds to the same gravitational forces, making you a living part of the cosmic rhythm that moves worlds. And tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest in the knowledge that while you dream, this eternal dance continues all around our planet. Tides are rising on shores you'll never see, falling in places you'll never visit, following the same laws that have guided them since long before humans walked the Earth, and will continue long after our species becomes part of the fossil record. The moon above you is the same moon that has been pulling on our oceans for billions of years. The gravity that holds you gently in your bed is the same force that moves mountains of water across the face of our planet twice each day. You are part of a universe that operates with mathematical precision and poetic beauty, where the smallest tide pool reflects the same principles that govern the largest galaxies. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers in this cosmic dance. May your sleep be as peaceful as the rhythm of gentle waves, and may you wake tomorrow with a deeper appreciation for the invisible forces that connect us all to the infinite beauty and mystery of our universe. Sleep well, knowing that you are exactly where you belong, not separate from nature, but woven into its very fabric, participating in a story that began with the birth of stars and will continue until the last light fades from the cosmic sky. You are stardust experiencing itself, water learning to think, gravity made conscious of its own gentle power. The tides will keep their eternal watch while you rest, and in the morning, they'll still be there, ready to remind you once again that you are part of something magnificent, mysterious, and infinitely beautiful. Good night, sleepy scientists. The cosmic lullaby plays on.